Welcome to Washington. This is The Hill on NewsNation. The White House now deploying 700 Marines to Los Angeles as protests against the administration's immigration actions continue. We are live coming up here on The Hill with the congressman who represents California's largest Marine base. Plus, is Gavin Newsom trying to pull a Trump? How the president responded today when asked about Newsom's political fortunes as California is set to sue the White House. Also this evening here on The Hill, major meetings. Why did the president summon his top military officials to Camp David? Mick Mulvaney, the president's former chief of staff, with us tonight here on The Hill. But first tonight, here from The Hill, the protests not stopping, with violence gripping the streets of Los Angeles. Law enforcement often the target. The governor of the largest state and the president of the United States now in a showdown.
Trump needs to pull back. He needs to stand down. Donald Trump is inflaming these conditions.
And until we went in, if we didn't do the job, that place would be burning down just like the houses burned down. They were in big trouble last night.
Hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight here on The Hill. I'm Blake Berman. Here's what we're going to do over the next hour or so here on The Hill. We're going to take you in, around, and outside of Los Angeles. Both the president and the California governor making major decisions today. California is saying, you know what, we're going to take legal action as the president has launched the National Guard. The White House saying, we're going to bring in some 700 Marines to the situation there. Let's take some of these pictures full if we can, and we're going to get down onto the ground in a moment here once we can, because we've been watching these aerials, right, in Southern California, in Los Angeles, and this has been much of the scene throughout the day. You see that law enforcement stacked up their law enforcement vehicles, and we've seen protesters and as vehicles have been making their way through, in some cases they've been kicked, they've been targeted. Of course, one of the big stories over the weekend was, traffic that was blocked up on the major interstates. We haven't yet seen that today, but that bottom banner there is the big story this hour, as some 700 U.S. troops, Marines, deployed to Los Angeles. Now, outrage over ICE arrests was the catalyst for what is playing out in LA right now. And I wanted to show you tonight how ICE arrests have sort of ebbed and flowed over the last two presidential administrations. Now, recently, the White House revealed that ICE arrests topped some 100,000 in the first 4 months or so in the president's second term. Hold that thought, because these are some live images coming out of Los Angeles there on the ground. You can see the troops there, or see the law enforcement rather there on the ground, the camera panning back and forth. And the good news here is, at least at this one scene there in Los Angeles, those folks are not being messed with. And that has not been the story there in Southern California for many days. I don't know if the news of the Marines being deployed maybe has made its way through, but that is the other side of the story, which is you still see the protesters there on the streets of Los Angeles. In some cases, it's turned violent. In other cases, it hasn't. In any ways, in some spots, law enforcement has been targeted, and this is day 4 of all of this going on. I want to bring in Antonio Villaraigosa. He is the former mayor there in Los Angeles. He's also running for governor in his state on the Democratic side of the aisle. Live with us this evening here on The Hill. Mr. Mayor, thanks for being with us tonight. Appreciate the time, sir.
Thank you for having me.
You've been watching these live images throughout the day as you see it, 3 o'clock there on the West Coast where you are. What do you make of what we've witnessed today?
Well, as you said, it's mostly been peaceful in downtown Los Angeles today. I went there earlier today and spoke in English and Spanish on social media platforms, saying to people that in the United States of America, we have a right to protest, but they should be peaceful protests, honoring the tradition of Martin Luther King and Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and Rosa Parks, that people, I understand the frustration that people feel, but there's no place for violence with respect to these demonstrations. And as you said, there have been some. Though to clarify for those of you, the viewers who don't know Los Angeles, Paramount is not Los Angeles. There have been some sporadic instances where there was some violence in Los Angeles, but it was mostly in a city southeast of Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mentioned that you're running for governor there. You hope to be the top official in that state in a couple of years, and there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of talk today about how President Trump here in Washington has responded and how the governor there in the state of California, Gavin Newsom, has responded. Diagnose it for me as you see it. What do you think Gavin Newsom has gotten right? What do you think he's gotten wrong?
Well, first of all, he's gotten right that we should take this to court. This was the first time in 60 years that the federal government has deputized the National Guard in this way, that they're bringing in federal troops. 60 years ago, they brought them in to protect the civil rights of Black Americans who wanted to go to schools and use our facilities and the like. Today, they're coming in to address demonstrations, most of which have been peaceful, some of which have not. And as I said, there's no place for violence in these demonstrations. The LAPD, the Highway Patrol, the sheriff who are out there, I saw Pasadena police, they can handle it. We don't need the Marines. We don't need to, we don't need to get folks riled up right now. A lot of people are seeing images. You're right. How about the image of the parents separated from their kids, going into supermarkets and schools, courthouses? That's not targeted, deportations. It's massive deportations.
What's Newsom gotten wrong here, though, Governor? Because there's obviously, and that's the feed of KTLA, our next star station there out in Los Angeles. If you see that pop up, but what can the governor have done better? What should he have done different?
Well, I think the city was in control, frankly, and I think he's been cooperating with them. I haven't followed everything he's doing.
You think what happened over the weekend was in control?
I do think this. I will distinguish myself here. I've said for a long time, we don't need to poke the bear every 2 minutes. But in this case, he was right to challenge what Trump is doing. I've said the best way to address what Trump is doing in D.C. Is to address the quality of life in California, the high cost of living, the tariffs he's bringing forward. But I don't have a criticism of the governor right now.
You don't think he could have handled this differently in any way? And I guess that cuts to, sir, the larger question here of how Democrats are tackling this issue. After all, California is a sanctuary city and California is a sanctuary state. Or Los Angeles is a sanctuary city.
Let me just say this. While I was mayor, when I started, LA was one of the most violent big cities in America, my friend. Look it up. Almost 50% drop in violent crime. I grew the police department. I took guns off the street. I developed innovative anti-gang and prevention and intervention programs. It dramatically expanded after-school programs and summer youth jobs. So I am focused like a laser beam on public safety. And I could tell you, this city has the police force. We have sheriffs and that work with us. We can handle this. We don't need to rile people up in the way and take the bait, because there was no reason to call the Marines and deputize the National Guard in this way. It was, even in Paramount, it was under control. But here in Los Angeles, I can tell you this, we've got it under control. We're asking people to be peaceful in their demonstrations. Look, I've said this everywhere I go. Every country has a right to enforce their borders. We should. They should have those people securing the borders. We should do so in a way that doesn't violate human rights, that doesn't divide children from their families. We should put a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million people that are working here. But I'll tell you, you want to get rid of all of them? Let's see what happens to housing costs in California. Let's see what happens to construction, to the cost of eggs, to the cost of virtually everything. The vast majority of these people are working hard every day. The ones that aren't, that are stealing and engaged in serious crimes, send them back. Everybody agrees with that. What they're doing here with these massive deportations, in places of shopping and schools and workplaces, it's just antagonizing people. We don't have to do it like that. America has a right way to do this and a wrong way, and this is the wrong way.
I want to leave it there. Antonio Villaraigosa, excuse me. Mick Mulvaney here, who I know you know well, sir, with us live here on the Hill. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Of course, as I mentioned, Mick is with us, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House Chief of Staff. Mick, hello. Welcome back from your international travels.
Hello, Berman. I leave for a couple of weeks and nothing happens?
There's
Is that what you're telling me?
A lot of news out there. So you just heard the perspective there of the former mayor who wants to be governor. On the other side of the equation, you have the Trump White House who says, look, these are ICE officers carrying out their job. They are carrying out deportations, and there needs to be law and order. That's their perspective.
And what's wrong with that? That's what I don't understand. It's like everybody, all the Democrats seem to be saying, well, it's not necessarily to do this much. Why get people riled up, etc. My understanding is that they went in to enforce the law and then were attacked by people. I could be wrong. It's so hard to get really good information these days, but we're getting some stuff out of KTLA that looks like that's what happened. So what's wrong with restoring law and order? And I guess the question is, why wouldn't Gavin Newsom do it? Listen, there's a parallel here. Go back to, when was the last time this happened? 1965. Why did President Johnson, federalize the National Guard? Because he wasn't comfortable that the governor would do the right thing. There are parallels here.
I'll ask you the same question that I asked the former mayor there, just the other side of the aisle. What did Trump do right? What did Trump do wrong?
It goes back to I think the general policy is right. Keep in mind, this is in the context of the larger discussion about sending a message to people who are thinking about coming here illegally. Don't come. We're closed. And we've talked for months and years about that. Okay. But I do think that they're going to be open to challenges about using the sledgehammer versus the scalpel. Are there citizens that they are impacting? We saw a reporter get shot today with a rubber bullet.
Right.
So I mean, they're going to have to be accountable for the overreach.
Lastly, in your time ever at the White House, this obviously now goes to the next level, which is 700 Marines deployed to LA. That sort of takes it to the next level, Mick? Are you surprised that the president went there?
No, not at all. Of course, I don't have a parallel. If you're asking me, did we have a parallel when I was chief of staff? I don't think
there would have been.
But no, it doesn't surprise me that he's using it. It's the next logical step.
You think next logical? How's that logical? There's going to be folks jumping through the TV saying, "How's that logical?"
That if the state is not going to cooperate, if the state is married to its sanctuary city status, and the LAPD are going to understand they're protecting buildings and so forth, but they're not actively engaged in putting the riots down, if that's not going to happen, Trump is going to put as many people on the street as necessary to restore law and order.
Hang around with me.
That seems logical to me, and I'd be curious to know why people would jump through the TV on that.
Hang around with me throughout the hour, if you don't mind, Mick Mulvaney. Thank you, sir. Still to come here on the Hill, the president versus the governor, as our coverage continues. More protests unfold in LA. Plus, remember that whole Elon and Trump feud? That was just a handful of days ago. And why did the president head to Camp David this weekend? What was going on there? Mick is back with me to help decode what is coming out of the White House. I thank you for staying with us here on the Hill on a busy news day. I'm Blake Berman. We're back in 4 minutes. 618 here on the East Coast, 318 out west, as the Trump administration says it is now sending some 700 Marines being deployed to Los Angeles. Those Marines expected to arrive over the next 24 hours or so. Joining us now here on the Hill, Republican Congressman from that state, Jay Obernolte. He is a member of the Budget and Energy and Commerce Committees. Thank you for being with us tonight, Congressman. Appreciate it. The 29 Palms Marine Base is part of your district.
It is.
Do you believe the commander-in-chief was right to make this decision to put U.S. troops on the streets there, on the ground in Los Angeles?
Yeah, well, to be clear, I mean, this is just a mobilization. This is not yet a deployment. So you're not going to see troops, on the streets of L.A. He's not invoked the Insurrection Act yet. But in my view, what this is a warning, right? And federalizing the National Guard was a warning. It's a warning to the protesters. Look, your First Amendment rights are sacrosanct. You can protest, you can yell into a bullhorn, you can wave signs. What you can't do is burn vehicles, you can't loot, you can't obstruct federal officials, you can't throw rocks at ICE vehicles. And it's a warning to Gavin Newsom. Obey federal law. There's a limit to how much you can obstruct here.
I guess you use the term warning, right? And I just heard 3 there as it relates to the National Guard, to the Marines, and to Newsom. That's a lot of layers there. At what point does he go further to where it makes even you uncomfortable?
Well, I mean, we'll see what the reaction is. So far, the reaction's been good. The protests today have been more respectful, less destruction of property, and I think you're seeing some more respect for federal officers. But everyone ought to remember, Blake, we have been here before, right? We went through this in the civil rights era, where.
Do you think this is that, though?
Sure.
Why? You think this is a comp?
Well, I mean, absolutely. Look at this.
So?
Look at the facts. The civil rights era, several times when Alabama National Guard troops were nationalized by the president, and by the way, 2 successive presidents, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, so this is not a partisan issue, and it was in the case of a state refusing to obey federal law, and this was federal civil rights law, and the presidents both stepped in at that point and said to the governor of Alabama, no, you cannot do that. Federal law is supreme, and you must respect federal law and enforce it. And ultimately, that's what's occurred. So nothing is different now than what was in back then.
What would you say, though, to folks who say, I don't know, Congressman, that's a leap?
I think the facts support that conclusion. I really do.
The governor there, you're a Republican in a blue state. And there's now this back and forth between Trump and Newsom. At the end of the day, your constituents just want to go about their lives and live their lives, right? Do you have any concerns that if this gets even more heated between the two, that's something that the president could take action against California that would influence your constituents in a way that you don't see fit?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? One of the things that every time I talk to the White House, I emphasize, do not punish all of the residents of California for the actions of just a few misguided leaders.
Are they receptive to that?
Yes, they are. And I point out that we have more Republicans in California than any other state in the country. So, don't lump everyone in California in with the actions of a few leaders. And, one of the things that I think really resonates with my constituents is they just want respect for the rule of law, Blake. That's what they're asking for. And so when they see their governor go on television and say, we don't need the National Guard, everything is under control, it rings false when you see cars burning, when you see rocks being thrown. And everyone in California has been through the BLM protests, and so they remember what it was like to have streets looted, stores looted, rampant lawlessness, and they don't want to see that happen again, regardless of political party. One
of the reasons we initially had you come on in here was for the state of the bill that you're negotiating here in Washington, and there is a provision there, Congressman, that deals with AI, in which it would not allow the states to regulate AI. You're a proponent of that. It's going to get, it sounds like, yanked out of this in the Senate. Here was J.D. Vance asked about this the other day, and I want to get your reaction.
Also, it says in there that there's a ban that at state levels they couldn't prosecute some of these AI companies, right?
So, yeah,
that sounds really sketchy.
To be honest with you, I don't think that's going to make it in the final bill, but I usually have a pretty strong view on most things. I can kind of go both ways on this because I don't want California's progressive regulations to control artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Republicans have this. This is a little bit of a squabble within your own party. What happens if they yank it out?
Well, I don't think that they will. I'm still optimistic it will stay in. And let me tell you why it's important. Article 1 of the Constitution gives solely to Congress the ability to regulate interstate commerce. And the commerce applications of artificial intelligence are clearly interstate. So the problem is we have over 1,000 bills pending in state legislatures attempting to usurp the power of Congress to regulate the interstate aspects of AI away from Congress. And we've learned to our misfortune, if we let the states get ahead, it's very difficult to be an entrepreneur when you have 50 different state regulations. So all this is saying to the states, it's temporary. It's a temporary moratorium. It says the federal government has to go first. And once the federal government has regulated the interstate commerce pieces, and we have a plan for doing that, then that will include some guardrails, and the states will be free outside of those guardrails to enact their own legislation. That's what the moratorium does.
All right. I'm sure we'll have more time to talk about the bill, but obviously you see the right side of the screen there. Jay Obernolte, a Congressman.
Good to see you, Blake.
You as well. Republican from California. Thank you, sir. Still to come tonight. Here on the Hill, a live look at the White House as the president today participated in what's known as Invest America. How that could lead to money in your kids' pockets. On the other side of the break, plus Mick Mulvaney back with us here as well. We can continue to keep our eye on Southern California, but there is a big world out there, don't you know, and lots of other headlines involving that man right there. Mick, when he returns. Stay with us here on the Hill. about 6:30 on the dot here in Washington, 3:30 out on the West Coast, and right now the latest on the situation in Los Angeles. Live looks there as anti-immigration protests continue for a fourth day in downtown LA, with protests in several locations. But right now there aren't the confrontations really that we saw over the weekend. Protesters, though, kicking vans. There are reports of throwing rocks as well. Protest marches in the downtown streets as well. At this point, the freeways are clear. The Trump administration, though, tonight not backing down. And 700 Marines will be deployed to Los Angeles, in addition to the National Guard. In the meantime, there is a big world outside of Los Angeles as we keep our eyes there on Southern California. A lot of other headlines in the news tonight. China, Iran, Israel, all on the president's agenda. As we believe it, as he was meeting with generals and admirals at Camp David over the weekend, also holding a 40-minute phone call with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Joining me now, once again, Mick Mulvaney, Trump former White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor. Hello, sir. We keep our eyes on the right side of the screen there. But I want to help you. I want you to help us sort of decode here what's going on outside of Los Angeles, because my radar went up, Mick, when I heard the president's going to Camp David. He was asked about it today, didn't want to give any sort of details. And then there was a phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'm wondering what's going on here.
Yeah, ordinarily, the president, any president going to Camp David isn't very newsworthy. Even Donald Trump, who didn't go a lot, he likes the place. And sometimes would go up there, as he told me one time, he goes, Mick, it's rustic, and ordinarily I don't do rustic, but it's rustic the way that I would do rustic. So he likes hanging out up there, but he prefers to be at Bedminster, prefers to be at Mar-a-Lago. And if he goes there sort of unscheduled, that sort of raises a little bit of attention. And then when he says he's meeting with generals and admirals, that's not his ordinary group that he hangs out with. So that you're right to sort of have your spider sense go off a little bit.
Here's what he said about Iran earlier today. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
I hate to say that because the alternative is a very, very dire one, but they're not there. They have given us their thoughts on the deal, and I said, it's just not acceptable.
On the possibility of an Iran nuclear deal, Mick.
Yeah, I mean, you marry a apparently unscheduled trip to Camp David with meetings with generals and admirals, which I guess is the words he used, in a 40-minute conversation with Netanyahu. Yeah, you're probably right to keep an eye on what's going on at Camp David.
Keep our eye on that. You, sir, were saying it was only a matter of time, and it became a matter of time, 136 days from Inauguration Day. Here's what the president said today about his potential relationship going forward with Elon Musk.
I haven't really thought about it, actually. I would imagine he wants to speak to me. I would think that. If I were him, I'd want to speak to me, and maybe he's already called. You'd have to ask him whether or not he's already called.
All right. The question there was about whether or not the president wants to speak with Musk and vice versa. What's going on here?
So we've talked before about how they sort of have to unwind peacefully. They haven't. Okay, but now I think we're seeing the fallout for what that means to each of them. Trump's capacity for forgetting is 0. His capacity for forgiving is 100. Okay. So this is a relationship that can be salvaged. I expect it to be salvaged. I never thought it would get this bad in the first place. But I think the president has actually been quite reserved in dealing with some of the things that Elon Musk said. I mean, if Musk comes out and talks about the Epstein files and he says stuff about Stephen Miller's wife, this is personal level stuff. And to see Trump relatively reserved under the circumstances.
That building there behind me, the big debate here in the Senate is over what to do about the one big beautiful bill. What's your sense tonight?
Ordinarily, bills get bigger in order to pass. You have to start adding stuff to pick up votes. I wonder if this isn't one of those exceptions where the bill gets smaller. And as we get closer and closer to these self-imposed deadlines, the July 4th deadline means nothing. The real deadline is that August 8th when the Treasury runs out of money. Maybe you start looking at something that gets pared down. Just an extension of the existing tax cuts and just a raising of the debt ceiling.
All right, we'll leave it there. See you later in the show.
I'll be here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Mick Mulvaney. All right, so as the focus remains in many parts on Los Angeles, President Trump today was actually holding a roundtable on something totally different. An initiative that is now known as Trump Accounts, though this really started as a concept known as Invest America. It's a program included in the Big Beautiful Bill. And under it, the federal government would seed $1,000 into investment accounts for children born in the U.S. basically in 2025, 26, 27, and 28. Now, that means a $1,000 investment, give or take, with 7% growth per year, would be worth somewhere in the area over $5,500 when that child becomes 25 and is eligible to use it on anything from education to buying a house to starting a business. And the brainchild behind all of this is Brad Gerstner. He was in the room with the president today. He's with Altimeter Capital. Brad, I've been trying to get you on the show for a while. So thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill. I follow you and I appreciate it. So tell me, you just heard Mick there.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. You heard Mick there. This is probably the bill, one of the things that ends up getting smaller, not bigger, because there's a lot of focus right now, right, on cutting spending, not growing it. In that environment, with this idea of let's give newborns $1,000, basically index it to the markets, and when they're 18 or 25 or 30, give them the money to have a better life. How'd you get that in?
Well, first, thanks for having me. It was an incredible day with the president, with leading CEOs across America, from Michael Dell to Dara Khosrowshahi of Uber to David Solomon of Goldman Sachs, etc. And, you know, it's in the bill because this is a core part of the president's Main Street agenda. The way you get everybody into the upside of America who's felt left out and left behind, no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, and start every child in America with the equivalent of a 401k from birth. Now, you just showed if no additional money was added, what it would be worth at age 25. But if you start with $1,000, you add $750 a year. And we heard today from companies representing millions of employees who said they would add to the accounts of those kids at birth. Yeah. Moms and dads will add to those accounts. Philanthropists like Michael Dell commented that he would add to the accounts. If you start with $1,000, you add $750 a year. At age 18, that is worth $50,000. At age 25 or 30, that's worth $300,000. Right. It's an amazing amount of money for these kids.
Do you worry, though, and inevitably some folks will add, right? Whether it's individuals or larger companies who have the means to do so. But for others, $750 is a lot of money. And for small businesses,
Unfortunately, I can't hear you. We're having some audio difficulty. So we may have to come back to this one. But let me just say, this is an incredible day for the White House, an incredible day for the president. And the reconciliation bill, the big, beautiful bill, carries the Invest America Act, and it's going to change the game for every kid in America.
Brad, you got me or no?
We'll come back and do this again.
You can't. Okay. Is that you trying to? Hold on. Is Brad there or no? Because I also wanted to ask you, Brad, can you hear me? Or because I wanted to ask you how you think the money ends up eventually getting used. You can't hear us.
No
you can't
joy.
Hear us.
No joy. I can't hear you guys.
Sorry.
I'm committed to coming back. Have me on anytime. Let's get this done in the Senate, and let's make sure that every kid has a shot at economic mobility and the upside of America and living the American dream.
Man, I wish you could hear me. Brad Gerstner, I'll take you up on that. Thank you, though. Appreciate it. All right, still to come tonight here on the Hill. On the other side of the break, back out to L.A. as the protests, violent over the weekend. You saw these images. And now there is a showdown between Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom as we see these live pictures, Marines deployed to that area when the Hill returns.
Cuomo tonight, one big night of newsmakers. UFO experts George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell share exclusive new findings. Then marketing legend Gary Vee joins Chris Live, a special edition of Cuomo with limited commercial breaks. Tonight at 8/7 Central.
NewsNation, these are live pictures, Los Angeles. You can see there on those shields there, it looks like the California National Guard keeping watch there as protesters, at least today for the most part, from what we've seen, have been scenes like this. Clearly not the case of what happened over the weekend. Here's what's happened today in this standoff there. California has said it is going to sue the Trump White House as it relates to the president's decision to send in the National Guard. The president basically one-upped that as the Trump administration has said that they are going to send in some 700 Marines from nearby Camp Pendleton. A live look here, once again, overhead, that same shot that we were just looking at, but it gives you a sense of some of what is happening there in Southern California. Back in Washington, the White House, at the White House rather, when President Trump was asked about this, he was asked a question about whether or not this situation benefits Gavin Newsom politically, and you can see some of it there. Keep in mind, and here's how the question was framed to President Trump. The president was arrested, right? Charged rather, during the campaign. And every single time that happened, back in 2023 and 2024, his poll numbers went up and to the right. And there's been a dialogue or a conversation about the possibility of an arrest of Gavin Newsom. And Donald Trump was asked today, if that happens, does it only just bolster Newsom's status? Here was the president.
No, I don't think it's going to help him. I think it's actually very bad for him.
It's part of the answer there. And here's really some of the dynamic. For President Trump, now the conversation of immigration and those policies are front and center for the president. But basically, he said today he doesn't think that it would benefit Newsom at all, what's going on. Scroll ahead through to some of the polling because I want to show you some of the figures, because back in April, here's how California viewed Gavin Newsom. Just 33% rather approved of the job that he was doing. 42% disapproved. And when asked if Newsom should run for president, he hasn't announced, but anyone in politics will tell you he is dying to move in that direction. Only 41% of Californians said yes of their own governor. 59% said no. And when it comes to the idea of mass deportations, it might surprise you to hear that in California, 40% of Californians actually think that is a good thing. So for Newsom here, when the conversation in that triple box on the right just a few months ago was the devastating wildfires there in California, now is he able to take on the president with that? And does the president get to bring his number one issue back in focus again? Mick Mulvaney. With me once again. So too is Chris Cillizza, NewsNation contributor. Lindsey Granger, NewsNation contributor as well. And T.W. Origi is a former communication aide to Senator Lindsey Graham. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. So this is the big story, obviously, out in L.A., both for Southern California, politically as well. But the question here is, does this sort of put both of them back on the issue that they want to be fighting on? Trump, immigration, and Newsom fighting Trump, essentially, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, Gavin Newsom probably in his wildest dreams can't wish that he was arrested by the Trump administration. I mean, candidly, like, it'd be a hero to the left.
Well, that's why the president was asked about this earlier today.
And again, it's not I'm not a lawyer, much to my mother's chagrin, but like, it's not entirely clear to me, like, what he would be arrested for. But point being, like, yes, he would be thrilled to do that because it would be like, I'm standing up for California. I think it's a dumb fight for. It's a fine fight for. It's a fine fight for Newsom. It's a dumb fight for Democrats more broadly, in my opinion. Like, as soon as there's violence, as soon as there's cars burning, I've watched cable all day. That's all that's been on. I just think it's a dumb fight. Immigration is where Donald Trump wants to talk about. We're not talking about the one big beautiful bill. Right. We're not talking about Trump versus Elon Musk. Immigration is the place that he remains the strongest. I just don't know why you fight him.
Dumb fight.
I mean, everybody agreed in the last election season that we wanted immigration reform, and the whole country said that in their voting. But the fact is, the way that President Trump is going about it, people were uncomfortable with, and that's really the crux of this.
Did they want immigration reform, or they wanted the border sealed?
Well, I think they wanted border change because we know that people were for that bipartisan bill that never made its way through Congress. And we know that Americans were open to that conversation and thought Biden moved too little too late. But to be here right now, I think the bigger issue for President Trump, if he wants to lean on this, because he is very tough on immigration and does have great ratings in that area, but it's the fact that he's skipping over these procedures and protocols that are so important. And Karen Bass went on the news last night and was like, listen, I don't know what the next step is. I'm not sure what's next for the National Guard being here. I'm not sure what's next. I'm sure now with the Marines being here. And that makes the whole situation look extremely crazy.
Do you want Karen Bass going on the news and taking on Donald Trump?
I mean, I think that it's better to be Newsom, but Karen Bass, I mean, they can definitely go toe-to-toe. I think that this is not a winning issue for the tactic that Trump's taking.
Oh, I disagree with that. I disagree with that fully because I just saw two brand new numbers. I believe they were from CNN. 54% of Americans agree with deporting all illegal immigrants. 51% of Americans support ICE agents in their towns finding illegal immigrants. The GOP, according to Ipsos's own numbers, is plus 19 on the issue of immigration. Karen Bass not understanding what to do next is part of the reason they're in this problem in the first place. She has no idea what she's doing.
Do they want Marines on the streets?
I think they want the law enforced. They want to feel safe. And
do they want Marines on the streets?
No, but the party of law and order.
Yes or no? They want Marines on the
if people are burning down their businesses, I do think they want better protection.
The party of law and order can't skip over the rule of law. So you would essentially need to talk to mayors and governors, like people have done in 1992, like with Hurricane Katrina. They called in federal help. To skip over the necessary steps to make this happen is
not
totally
necessary. They're not entirely necessary. The president has the right to do this. This is what the lawsuit is about. The president did it in 1965 under different circumstances, but for the same reason. If a president says, you know what, there's unrest here, the governor, I don't think is going to do the right thing about it, I'll call up the National Guard and federalize them. That's the exact same logic that went into what happened in Selma in 1965. Again, different circumstances, but the same logic. So it's not like they skipped over a bunch of stuff.
Well, I think this is agitation, right? Because it wasn't like when we watched the first day of protests, it didn't look like yesterday, right? And what happened is that was the response to the agitation.
I just wonder whether we follow this stuff minute by minute. I wonder if the average American is like aware of it. I think TW broadly, I think people are like,
they don't know
oh, look, they're burning cars. They're they're burning cars. They're throwing things at the cops. We don't like that. Like, yes, I think there's a real conversation of, okay, do Donald Trump's deportation policies, are they appropriate? Are they catching the right people? Are they catching the wrong people? But as soon as you have violence in the streets like that, the American people see that and they say, well, we don't want that, and whatever can combat that, I'm for.
I guess what I was getting at with you, TW, is what is your, if any, what is your concern of, there's always a spectrum, right, of going too far on the spectrum.
Yeah, of course. When you see more people with weaponry and shields and guns, it gets those people agitated. But equally as powerful, if not more powerful, is we just saw reporting of a caravan of people going to block a freeway. We knew that people were looting in downtown LA. We had people attacking and trying to gain entry to a federal building. Those are far more overriding factors than potential escalation among the ne'er-do-wells who were there throwing rocks and bricks at people.
Well, let me ask you this. California, the world's fourth largest economy, headline, takes on Trump and threatens to withhold $80 billion in federal taxes. Newsom's going there. Lindsay's smiling and laughing.
We tried that one time in South Carolina. We called it secession. It didn't work out.
Wasn't a great thing.
Do you want to go there?
I mean, I think that this is just a back and forth between two men that obviously don't get along. But I also think, I want to just go back to this. I think this being opposing the federal and national deployment doesn't mean that you're pro-crime. And so I want to have a conversation about people saying that they think that the states can handle it, right? And Republicans should lean on that and say, I think that the states can handle this issue
but it's
that's
really
happening.
hard. It's the same thing that Christopher Van Hollen was trying to do with the guy that got deported to El Salvador. It's hard to have that conversation without looking like you're standing up for the bad guys, which is what Gavin Newsom runs the risk of right here. I think Chris is right. People don't follow this. They don't know the difference between the National Guard and the local police and the Marines. They know, wait a second, there's apparently a riot. I'm against that. Why is Gavin Newsom standing up and not doing more?
I filled in on the Sunday show for Steyerwalt this weekend. I brought that exact point up, which is, do Democrats run the risk of saying, hey, for the average American, they know, oh, Democrats went to El Salvador and fought for Abrego Garcia, and then they're like, wait a minute, what's going on where my friend lives in Los Angeles?
And Trump is good. Look, like him or hate him, and I feel like everyone feels one of those two ways. There's no one who's like, Trump, I don't know what I feel. But like him or hate him, like, he's good at picking smart battlegrounds to have political fights. We have talked about Harvard. Look, do I think what he's doing with Harvard is close to extortion? I do. At the same time, is Harvard a sympathetic actor? Not in the least. So he picks smart fights. Now that's the what. The how, to me, is more problematic.
I got to run, but here's how I want to end this. Trump said today he thinks this is a 95-5 issue. It's not. Nothing's really a 95-5 issue. What do you think the high-end number is here?
With the American people, I think it's 54, 55%.
60-40.
I think it's, with people burning cars, 65, 70, 30.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Berman.
You got it. Still to come. What is bilingual? You probably know that definition, right? You don't have to go to Harvard. You're bilingual? What's the next question? I'm going to tell you on the other side of the break why there actually might be a new definition for that, believe it or not. And coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, she'll speak live with the former DHS Secretary Ken Cuccinelli. That's coming up here on News Nation. My Take, other side. All right, so when you think of someone as being bilingual, you think of them as speaking more than one language, right? After all, of the close to the 350 million people in the United States, it's believed about 80 million, 23% are bilingual. But the definition of bilingual as we know it, could that be shifting? The executive vice president of Ohio State says, quote, through AI fluency, Ohio State students will be bilingual, fluent in both their major field of study and the application of AI in that area. And that's not the only school taking that route. Both the University of Maryland and Cal State, for example, are working to make AI part of students' everyday studies. This month, Duke began offering unlimited ChatGPT access. So with the average cost of college being $11,000 per year in-state, $24,000 public out-of-state, $43,000 for private, you might scoff at the idea of students utilizing AI and call them out for laziness. After all, it was the mid-90s, right? When the internet was first being utilized, it was a way for students to cheat on those papers. Now, in the days to come, the class of 2029 will start filling out university campuses, and it seems as if AI is going to be part of their next 4 years, well beyond that as well. Their parents probably wondering how they might help them move into their dorm room or who the new roommate might be, but they also might be wondering if AI can at some point help lower those skyrocketing tuition costs. That's my take tonight. I thank you for being with us on a busy afternoon here on the Hill.